Welcome back to the Lynn Hates Freeland Show. Dr. Lawrence Drake II is my guest. He's written a book called Color Him Father, and it is the story of 7 fathers who have lost their children in a variety of different ways. It started with him and his story, and that's where we pick up our conversation.
Yeah, so, my daughter, an amazing young woman. She was 41, we had an amazing relationship. I can recall so many times and so many memories that I tend to remember every single day. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, on my desk in my office, I have a radio book, which is a book that she could record for her son when he was wishing me Happy Grandpa's Day. And so she was reading the book to him. He was about 6, 7 months at the time. And so he, of course, what he was saying was gibberish, but she was reading the short poem to him about his grandpa. And every so often I get the courage to open that book.
To hear her voice.
And hear her voice, because that's the only way I'm going to ever hear it again. Even at the event that we had at August Wilson, there were moments when I just, had a hard time getting through my conversation. But that happens often. I still cry every day. I still have a moment, 2, sometimes more than that, because she was so important to me. One of my other fathers in the collective, he said to me one day, he said, if we didn't love them so much, it wouldn't hurt so bad. Mm-hmm. He said, but we just really love them so much, and I don't think the world understands how much fathers, and particularly black fathers, love their children. For me, Kia was not only my oldest and my firstborn, but she was my little girl. And I called her that even though she was 40 and 41. I would sometimes answer the phone and say, hey, little girl, because that was just our way of communicating. It's hard sometimes to believe that I'm not going to hear that phone ring and she says, hey, Dad. But I'm grateful for the time that I had, truly.
So here's the thing. The world has this stereotype of who black fathers are.
Right.
And that image is that black fathers aren't present,
Yep.
that black fathers don't really know how to love
Right.
their children.
Right.
They certainly don't support them, provide for them,
Right.
or are engaged with them.
Right.
This book, Color Him Father, dispels all of that.
Yeah, that was one of the major ideas behind the book, is to start breaking down that myth that exists. The journey of black fatherhood began 400 years ago, actually, to this year, 1619. When we first got here as slaves, the insidious nature of breaking up the family began then. As slave children's status was determined by the mother and not the father. Yet if we really understand our history, we know that many fathers to feed their children and their wife on a plantation, sometimes as much as 15 to 20 miles away, walking. And they would do that all night and then spend all night up until the morning, knowing they could have been caught.
I was going to say, because there was a risk involved.
There was a risk, tremendous risk. But again, the idea of how much fathers sacrifice for their children even then translates to today. Many of us, thousands and thousands of us, are very close to our children. Even if we're not with the mother, we're still with our children. The world needs to know that, and I wanted to begin the process of creating a movement around dispelling that notion.
So 7 fathers, all who lost their children. In a variety of different circumstances.
Right.
Illness?
Yes.
Homicide?
Yes, suicide.
Suicide?
Yep.
Other than the loss of the child, what's the commonality? The emotion, the grieving, what's the commonality among these fathers?
Well, the first commonality is we're all black and we're all men, and we're all fathers. And we begin at that place because the journey of a black father in America is different than the journey of other fathers. One might say that, you know, grieving is grieving, and it is. And one might also say that losing a child is painful no matter what culture you come from. But our culture is a bit different. It's nuanced in the sense that many black men and by proxy black fathers don't feel valued in America, don't feel like we're part of society. And the commonality is that when we can experience and discuss openly in a safe space the feeling of being where we are as fathers, as black men in America, with this tremendous loss on top of that, it's pretty powerful for us. So much so that this collective of men, which I knew them all, they didn't know each other.
Okay.
When we came together, it was a tremendous time because I brought them all together on a few occasions, and just had them talk about and talk with each other. And it was, despite all of the pain that we were feeling, in a couple of occasions, some of the fathers I had not seen cry broke down when they talked because it was the only time they had done that for quite a while. They felt safe among these men who had a very similar, very exacting experience.
Well, and that in itself is fascinating to listen to because men in our culture are taught to be strong, to not show emotion, to almost not have emotion.
Right.
And I mean, from the time our kids are 2, it's like, man up, don't do that, don't you cry, boy.
That's right.
So I don't know how you guys deal with that.
You know, it's a very interesting dichotomy. As a psychologist, I began to try to understand sort of our station and how we behave emotionally around this. I've done some research on crying. Why do humans cry? And then sort of peeling the onion back, why do men either resist it or not? And one of the things I discovered about the black culture and about us in our culture is that there's these two things juxtapositioned against one another: rage and vulnerability. Now, vulnerability, as defined by the dictionary, is a weakness. So you don't do that. That's kind of like man up. That's kind of like don't do that.
Okay.
The rage, on the other hand, we feel every day from discrimination and lack of feeling valued and feeling important. So we get that as well. And so the challenge for us is, how do you balance those two things, not only day to day, but I mean moment to moment? I walk in a store and somebody, you know, some microaggression takes place, and I feel that rage. While at the same time, I may be holding my grandchild or my daughter's hand, and I know that with them, I can't let them see that rage. I must
now
let
you're
them
in the
know
store,
I
they're
care.
following you around the store,
Absolutely.
watching your every move.
Absolutely.
But what you do, how you react now.
My kid is going to be looking.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We got to take a commercial break.
Okay.
So much to talk about. We'll be right back.